It's a pleasure to be here. And I know the first question is spiritualism relevant today? So before I start my talk, I'm going to say, yes, it absolutely is. And I really feel that there's a lot of the spiritualist philosophy that could really help a lot of people better understand near-death experiences, walk-in experiences, all kinds of experiences that we're going through today as we're shifting into a new type of consciousness. And I use the word spiritualist philosophy because I really believe that you don't have to change your religion to follow spiritualist philosophy, because there's a little bit of it embedded in every religion. Per se. I was just going to take a moment and tell you, how did I come to spiritualism? Well, most of my life I knew nothing about spiritualism, and there were two events that really got me to come in this direction. The first one was that when I was 16, I had a near-death experience, which no one could explain to me at the time. And then the second major event was September 11th. I had to run from the debris from the first tower falling. So after that, I decided that I really, New York was a little bit difficult for me. So I took a job up in Rochester at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And little did I know that Rochester was the birthplace of spiritualism. So once I got up there, I found out about spiritualism, and I thought, wow, this can really start to tell me what happened with my near-death experience. So I found a spiritualist church, joined the church, and from there it just blossomed. My mediumship developed fairly quickly. I knew I was a medium before, but never found anybody as a teacher that I really wanted to work with until I found the spiritualist groups. So what is spiritualism? Well, traditionally we say that spiritualism is a science, a religion, and a philosophy. Now, the reason why we say it's a science is because, and you have to think about Victorian times too, in those days they didn't have as many scientific experiments as they do today. The fact that mediums could come and bring proof of existence of past lives was considered evidence and considered scientific, so that all of these facts that were brought forward are all part of the science of spiritualism. However, there still are people that are doing research in the scientific areas. For example, the Arthur Findlay College is now doing more research on this topic. And we see that, okay, as a religion, it is a religion. We do have church services on usually Sunday, sometimes Wednesday nights people meet, but we have a regular church service. Our service includes healing, it includes a lecture, it includes demonstrations of mediumship. Those are all part of it, and of course singing hymns to raise the vibration. So when you go to a spiritualist church service, you will see people giving messages to people in the congregation. Depending on the church, in some churches everybody gets a message, in other churches it's just a select group because they've been cutting the timing back a little bit. When we say that spiritualism is a philosophy, and I think the philosophy is the most important part, because the philosophy of spiritualism is based on something called natural law. And natural law we can find in all religions. There's elements of it, and probably the most common one is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Spiritualism as a philosophy very much believes that you, as the individual, must take personal responsibility for your own life. We believe in God. We believe in the brotherhood of man. We believe in the communion with spirits and the ministry of angels. We believe that what people do in their lives, they receive rewards, and they have to atone for things that they do in life, that you can't just say certain prayers and it'll all go away. If you do something, you're responsible for it. And this, I think, is one of the key things that makes spiritualism really important for people today, because you can't pass the buck. You can't say, oh, so-and-so did it to me, or you can't say that it's because this happened in a past life, this is going on with me today. No, no, no. You have to take responsibility for all of the things that you do. Now, the good thing is that if we're not perfect, we know that we're not perfect. So when we make a mistake, we have a chance to atone for it. And the idea is that we're always on a spiritual path. And on that path, we want to be growing more and more on our spiritual journey. And when something goes wrong, we have to understand and learn from it, so that we can progress further along on a spiritual path. So natural law tells us that like attracts like, and negative attracts negative. And I know that there are all these new age people that come up with these like laws of attraction, or laws of prosperity, law of abundance, law of all these different things. But it really comes down to the fact that like attracts like, and things that are not alike don't attract each other. So if you're a negative person, what's going to happen to you? You're going to attract negative types of things. If you're a positive person, then positive things are going to happen in your life. And if you want to change your life around because things aren't working out so well, then you have to change your attitude. You have to think about things in a more positive nature and a more positive way. And the way you live your life is very important in spiritualism. This isn't something where you just go on Sunday and, okay, you're okay for the rest of the week. No, you have to really try to incorporate the principles, which are guidelines. They're not rules. There's no mandates that you have to do anything. You don't have to do anything in spiritualism. It's just a suggestion that if you do these things in your life, you will be much happier. Your life will be much more rewarding because you're being positive. And I think this is important to know, because when we talk about negative types of spirits and things, spiritualists don't focus on that. And the reason why we don't focus on it is because, very simply, if I were to run around saying, oh, I ward off evil spirits for people, I'm inviting those spirits into my life. Where if I walk around in my life saying, yeah, they're there, but they're not part of my reality, they don't come near me because I'm not calling them to me and I'm not attracting them to me in any way, shape, or form. And people can attract spirits to them without even realizing it. It's all in your attitude and how you look at things and how you behave and believe in life and how you treat others. So, I mean, the bottom line for me is that, especially when people say, oh, I'm having all these, there's a negative energy attached to me. Well, I don't believe in that, because I don't think things attach to a person. I think they're attracted to a person. So, for example, if you're a drug addict or you're an alcoholic, you're going to attract those types of vibrations or energies to you and towards you. And if you don't want those types of energies near you, then you have to change the way you think or change what you're doing in your life. You have to stop taking the drugs and stop drinking so much. Otherwise, it's not going to change. And it's okay, fine. If you go to someone who's an energy healer that tries to change the energy around you or clean your chakras or whatever, that may help you feel better for the moment. But to really get that to go away, you have to do an internal change. So with spiritualism, we always think about the highest and the best. And instead of using the word protection, when I want to make sure that I'm safe in a safe surrounding, I always say, I want the highest and the best around me. And I only want the highest and the best to come near me, because that's all I need to do, is think in the positive and think that everything good is only going to come to me. And it does. So I don't worry about attracting some negative things when I'm doing a seance or I'm doing any kind of my spirit work, They don't. Have I had them come towards me? Yes. Yes, I've experienced some negative types of spirits and things. But the other thing is, I wasn't afraid. When you're afraid and you're fearful, that's another thing that attracts negativity. So when it happened to me, I was aware it was happening. I was aware that I was there. I was aware that the spirit was there, but I didn't get afraid and I didn't panic, and I just let it pass. And it passed, and everything regained back to my own normal self, which was fine. So, and when I'm working with students, if I see a negativity around them, I don't say to them, oh my God, you've got a negativity around you. I say, okay, it's time to come back, relax, and let's invoke the highest and the best. And let's surround ourselves with the highest and the best. And then we'll begin to work again and see what happens. And when I say work again, and I think this is really key to spiritualism, is the blending. And a lot of people say, what is this blending you're always talking about? The blending is a blending of your personal soul, spirit, with the spirit world. And the way we start to do this is in the process of sitting in the power. And what sitting in the power is sitting in power is not a meditation state. It's really trying to feel your own internal strength, your own internal spirituality. And by feeling that spirituality and feeling it build inside you, you're able to then blend with the spirit world. And I have to say where this blending occurs, and I think it's important, because a lot of people try to blend in their head, and that's not where the power comes from. The power comes from the solar plexus. And that's why when physical mediums and trance mediums work, they're working from a power source that's deeper within them. Their breathing must go all the way through the body. It can't be a shallow type of breathing. You must go deep. And the sensations and the feelings and the energy must be a very deep energy. So we'll work on blending and being in the power. And once you've got your power base, basically, then you're able to go and touch with the spirit world and allow the spirit world to blend with you. And I have to say, it really is a blending. It's not a possession. It's not spirit coming into me per se. It's a blending of my energy with the spirit energy. And when I can do a deep blending, and there's different kinds of blending, when I do a deep blending, my hands actually start to feel like the person's hands. If they're bigger than mine or smaller than mine, my hands will feel like they change. In the last one I did, I could feel rings on the person's finger that were not my rings. So I start to feel the person, and then the personality of that individual reveals themselves to me. So they'll start to tell me things about themselves. When you're doing mediumship, it's not that deep. It's on a higher level, but the blending still has to occur. You have to blend with the spirit person, and the goal is to make that spirit person come back to life for the individual sitting there. You want that person to think, my father has been here, my mother's with me, my pet, even pets, my pet is here, so that you make them feel the sense and the presence of that spirit. And that is the goal of true mediumship. It's not to just tell you you're going on a vacation or you're going to meet a new boyfriend or things like that. Not at all. If you blend with the spirit enough, that person can give you all kinds of information and all kinds of details. And that's what evidential mediumship should be about. And it shouldn't be about a shopping list of when did you die, when were you born, how old were you? No, it should be a blending with that spirit, so that spirit is communicating with the medium, and that spirit is telling the medium about themselves, about their lives, about things that they were doing. And an example just came to my mind. I was doing a reading for a woman, and her father was just a very delightful man, and I could feel his love, and I could feel his energy, and I knew that in the memory he brought to me was he used to sit around the excuse me, the dinner table with everyone. I said the dinner table at night was very important for the family. I said he would sit at the dinner table and he would go around the table and would ask every one of you what you did that day. And she said, yes, that's the way he was. And I gave her some other examples of things, excuse me, that he did that really helped to bring him back to life for her. And that's what you want to do with it. And when you look at things from a blending perspective, then you start to see that a lot of these ideas that people have about spirits, possessions, attachments, all of this can't work, because if it takes so much energy for me to blend with the spirit, if someone was possessed, they would just be totally sleeping all the time. I mean, they couldn't maintain the energy, because you can't maintain the energy for a very long period of time. So, I mean, I think we have to start looking at what is the difference between active imagination, true mediumship, and, psychic types of phenomena as well. I mean, we can pick up vibrations from individuals and people, and we can tell them things about themselves, but that's not mediumship. I mean, mediumship is a direct spirit communication. And to do that, you need to train yourself to be able to blend. In many ways, mediumship is very simple. In other ways, it's very difficult. It's very simple because you have to clear your mind of all the clutter, everything that's going on, and allow the spirit mind to be able to impress its images on yours. On the other hand, it's very difficult to turn off all that clutter and noise in your life. And also, people are very conscientious about their performance and what they're doing. And as soon as somebody starts saying, well, I'm not really good at this, or I'm not really good at that, they're shifting back into their thinking mind and they're losing their link. So getting the link and maintaining the link and getting all the information is not an easy process. And most people don't take the time to really learn how to be a spiritual person and how to truly connect with a spiritual world so that they can communicate messages to other people. Now, I do also have to emphasize that spiritualism is about healing. And the healing aspect of it sometimes is overshadowed by the mediumship. But the true purpose of spiritualism is to help heal people. And it helps to heal them in many different ways. And very important part of the religion is hands-on healing. And the spirit healing and hands-on healing is equally as important in my mind as the mediumship. Now, some mediums are also healers, and some people just want to be healers alone. But the two go together. So in spiritualism, we have a rich tradition of teaching people how to do spirit healing. When we're doing messages, the messages that are given to people should be of a healing nature. They're always positive. If you're getting a negative type of information from someone, then it's not coming from a spirit place. Spirit never tells you what to do. Spirit only makes suggestions. So it's fairly easy to tell when some people are really having spirit communication and when they're not, because you just listen to what they're saying. And if the saying isn't positive and isn't healing, they're not working on a spiritual level. Do we have questions?
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Susan. Nice to meet you for the first time. And I guess it's, as just Allan Kardec said once, he said, come on, in the United States, what we call in France, Spiritism, they call there spiritualism, because it's very similar. there are little differences, like, for example, the point of religion, that religion, the point is the Latin way of thinking religion, as I already talked about this here. When we speak about religion, we think about the Latin origin of the word of relicare, connection with the spirituality for us is religion, while for the Saxon English-speaking people, when you say religion, it's about cults, it's about churches, and this is the difference, But anyway, it's at the basis of every religion. Every religion has at this base, a big religion has at its basis the paranormal, the contact with the spirits. From Christianity to whatever you everything, the basis is that. And another very important point Susan points out here is that we're talking about natural laws that will be able to be accessed even by streamlined science. And that's so important, and that's why we use science, and you do use science too, to endorse these very important philosophical teachings that ends up in the unconditional love and learning how to love, learning how to be good. And I think this is very good. Thank you very much for the explanation. And I see very little differences in our in the way we do things and we think. Thank you very much, Susan.
There really is, but I was going to make one note to you. One of the reasons why spiritualism is a religious organization, especially in the United States, is because they needed to make it that kind of organization in order to function within this society. That if they didn't have it as a religious organization, they couldn't really have it as an organization, if you know what I mean. So that was, I would say, more constraints of our culture.
Yes, I've been told about that. It was a very nice explanation to me. What we don't have here in Brazil, because, for example, Spiritism, as I told them before, has about 14,000 institutions in Brazil, from hospitals to schools, from spiritist centers. All of them work with mediumship, just like you. They work with demonstrations of the mediumship and lectures about the philosophy of and all. But they are not recognized as a religion. They don't even have any kind of financial help from the government. Everything is sustained by the components, by the members of the organization. But that's I understand that in the United States they had, for many purposes, legal purposes, to be reinforced as a religion. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Otherwise, we wouldn't have nonprofit status, which helps to pay for expenses. So things aren't as costly for us. Yeah, so that's why they do it mainly.
So, Susan, what's the relationship between spiritualism and Christianity?
Okay, now that's very interesting. There is something called Christian spiritualism, and from my understanding, in England, that was accepted as a religion before spiritualism was. And what Christian spiritualism is Christian spiritualists believe much more in the Bible and Jesus Christ and all of that. However, where it differs from Christianity is in the idea of personal responsibility. Because, and there's this term vicarious atonement that some people may or may not know. We do not believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. Nobody can die for our sins. We are responsible for our own sins. So that's where it differs. Although Jesus and some of the Christian ideas like the white light of Christ, I mean, I heal with the white light of Christ. My Hindu friends heal with the white light of Christ because that's much more universal. But we look at Jesus as a master teacher, as an ascended master. We just don't really play up the story of him, dying on the cross as much. But it's the personal responsibility part is where we differ from Christians. Christians, the main difference.
Craig had a question. Craig?
Yeah, that was my question also, Susan, because I've seen this uncomfortable mix of evangelical Christianity with spiritualism. And I know of a church that is close by here that teaches A Course in Miracles and
Mm.
sings the old Christian hymns. And if you quiz them, if you ask them about it, they will say, "Oh yes, I have been saved, and I'm by the blood of Christ," and they have all of the vocabulary of the evangelicals.
See, we don't believe that. You can't be saved by the blood of Christ. You can only be saved by yourself. I mean, you have to make the changes within your own spiritual journey. Somebody else can't do it for you. So that's where it differs. And some of the, evangelicals, they don't take the time to really find out what spiritualism is. I mean, if you look at the spiritualist principles, there's just peace and love in them. There's nothing evil. And they think that we're, Satan. And I've had them yell at me. And I have family members who think I'm probably Satan. And spiritualism is so far from that. It's so far from that type of thing that it's really boggles my mind. But people are very locked into their own thinking, so they don't understand it.
Yeah, and I don't think that these spiritualist churches understand it either. They are using this loose blending of spirituality and or spiritualism and evangelical Christianity, and
Yeah.
and we've seen that happening. And
I haven't seen that happening, but I've seen it in the metaphysical churches. I've seen that the medical physical churches will come and say, "Oh, we're spiritualists, we're spiritualists," and I start talking to them, and it's like, "No, you're not."
Mhm.
And in fact, a lot of people who say some of this, we have 4 spiritualist churches in Lilydale. There's only one that is a real spiritualist church. And what I'm looking at now is as the world is changing so much, people are starting to recognize that this spiritual church holds the center. The ideas in this church, although some of them people say it's old-fashioned, you're not new, whatever, but it holds the center. I mean, you can go this way or that way with spiritualism, but the ideas that this group have is like, okay, we're going to try to hold spiritualism together the way it used to be. And there's very few people left around here in Lilydale that know the old, true spiritualist ways. So it's important to me to try to keep the foundation of spiritualist philosophy together. And a lot of these people, I think they pick and choose what they want, and they don't take the time to really learn it and understand it. And it's in the older books that I find the real teachings of spiritualism, not in the newer ones. Andrew Jackson Davis's books are considered to be fundamental texts in spiritualism. There's a lot of books that were written by various ministers and people in the late Victorian times, turn of the century, that are freely available on the internet. For example, works of spirit guides, Ramadan, Silver Birch, all of that type of literature is considered spiritualist texts. No, the Fox sisters did not write anything that I do know of. However, there were a lot of people that documented what was going on at the time of the Fox sisters, because the journalists and everything were very prolific at writing about it. Emma Hardge Britton has a number of texts. She has a book on, modern American spiritualism that has a lot of this information in it. And so there are many books around, and again, you go to the guides like Silver Birch and Imperator and different people, and you get their words of wisdom. So it is an experiential type of thing, yes. And it doesn't have a book like the Bible. And all we have is guidelines from the many different people that have experienced the religion. And I would say to you, the books by spirit guides, the teachings of spirit guides would be more engaging than probably a lot of the books by people for you. The continuity of life is a major part of our religion, and this is where it can really help other people, especially when we start to look at the death and the dying process and the fear that a lot of the other religions have put into people. I mean, it's like the fear, oh, you're going to go to hell, you know, if you're bad, or you have to wait until the judgment day to get into heaven, or only a certain number of people can get into heaven. And this is totally wrong. We believe that the personal identity of the individual continues after they go through the change called death, so that I can communicate with my Father in spirit, because he's there. His soul is there in spirit, and it's intact, and I can, you know, relate to that. And that when we go on to the next level, it's just a continual progression. And depending on how you've lived your life is where you're going to go in the next stage of things. I know I'm saying this because in a lot of the spiritualist readings, they've done readings on people who've been in dark spaces and didn't know they were dead. And so we talk about spirits that are earthbound spirits and things like that. And yeah, there's an explanation for it. And the explanation is that if someone passes, in some cases, especially if they haven't lived a really good life, they may die and not know they're dead. And they're dwelling in a space that's a very dark space. And to get them out of that space, they usually have to see someone they know who's passed before them. And once they're pulled out of that space, they can begin to grow, because the idea is that we all want to continue to grow. We all want to move towards being better and more spiritual people. And you can do that on the earth plane, and you can also do that in the spirit world. You can, and there are people that do this. I mean, I have friends that are Hindus and spiritualists. I know a lot of people here that are Jewish and spiritualists. I mean, some people, and don't say you have to become a spiritualist. There are some people that live their lives by the philosophy of spiritualism, and they maintain their other religion as well. I mean, that to me is perfectly acceptable, because in spiritualism, we believe that everybody has to find their own definition of God. Everybody has to find their own path. I can't tell you what's best for you. Only you can do that. And so by being open to all of these different types of religions and things, which we are, in some ways, and it was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle who said that spiritualism is like an umbrella to all of these other religions, that all of the other religions are really part of spiritualism, and spiritualism is part of them. So yes, and especially in our culture, as we start to see more people doing near-death experiences, having out-of-body experiences, having all of these spiritual experiences that Christianity and traditional religions can't explain. And that's how I ended up in spiritualism, because Christianity couldn't explain to me what was a near-death experience, quite honestly. And when I learned about the continuity of life and that the soul goes on, then I said, oh, that's it. That's it. Because I was, in this transition state that was happening between the two worlds. So I think a lot of people are accepting ideas, of spiritualism, although they may not be outwardly saying it's spiritualism.
So where is spiritualism going? What's the future for spiritualism as a movement, do you see?
Well, there are several organizations that, and I'm going to say, that are holding the line of spiritualism. One of them is the NSAC, National Association of Spiritualist Churches in the United States, and the other one is the SNU. Now, the SNU is losing people because they haven't really figured out how to move themselves into the contemporary world. And I know this is my agenda in Lilydale is I'm putting together a speakers program called Spiritualism Today, where I'm bringing in a lot of people that are not necessarily spiritualists, but we're dealing with topics that demonstrate how spiritualist thinking and philosophy is in things like Carl Jung's work and in areas we're bringing in young modern art and even the architecture that we have around here and near-death experiences. So I'm trying to start to show the relationship between spiritualism and all this kind of stuff out there, which I think is what is needed. And I know the reason why the SNU is interested in the work we've been doing here in the Dale is because we have been working with academics to get them to understand what the real meaning of spiritualism is, because many of them have watered down versions of it, you know. And even when I see some of the research on mediums where they don't really make a distinction between a medium and a psychic, then I know the work is flawed because there is a difference and most people don't know it. So a lot of it's education. I mean, it's really education. And so that's what spiritualists need to do, is they need to start to bring the philosophy out there and educate people as to what it is. I know we try to do that at Lilydale the best we can, but it's still gotten watered down here quite a bit.
I'd like to ask Susan, how do you see spiritualism continuing to live and to thrive? How, I know we said that that the churches are, as with any church, are diminishing. But what is the strength of it that's there? That
I think for me, part of the issue is that spiritualism is also a philosophy. And as religions start to wane and organized religions start to become less important within our culture, we can't lose the philosophy. I think the philosophy that spiritualism can share can help us all to be better people and to make a better world for all of us to live in. So it's the philosophy that I see definitely moving forward. I'm not a person that says everybody's got to change their religion and become a spiritualist. Not at all, but it's the philosophy that really tells us about all of these new types of spiritual experiences that are going on today. You know, and there's all kinds of new things. And yeah, there'll be new people making new religions, and spiritualism is going to evolve, could evolve into something slightly different than what it is now. But I do think that it's the core of it is the philosophy.
Thank you, Susan. And I think it's important for people to realize that spiritualism did not begin in 1848. It goes back for millennia. The philosophy of this, the teachings of spiritualism go back through indigenous cultures as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when we go back and we look at things, we see that there were seers, there were mediums, there were people that were doing different types of shamanic types of things all through ancient history. It was just, in fact, even in the United States, the Davenport brothers were hearing rappings before the Fox sisters. I mean, it's just that modern spiritualism takes that date in 1848 of the Fox sisters as a beginning, but it was really going on before. In fact, Andrew Jackson Davis was technically not a spiritualist. He was writing before the spiritualism occurred. I mean, look at Swedenborg. Swedenborg is considered a spiritualist because of the philosophy and the writings that he did, but technically he wasn't a spiritualist. So, I mean, if we've got to go back and we've got to look at the writings and the philosophy of these people, and I would just say to you that from my point of view, I'm trying to put the spiritual back into everyday life. And one way that I'm doing that is through my writings, especially on modern art and things, where in modern art, the spiritual was totally denied in the history, by the art critics, by all these people. Now, why did it happen? Well, one reason I think it happened is that all of our media and our technology has helped to not deny the spiritualism. And that's what I'm researching right now. I mean, Marshall McLuhan, who wrote The Medium is the Message, was a devout Catholic. He was very concerned about the spiritual crisis that was going on in our world today. He predicted the opioid epidemic. He predicted all of these types of terrorist things that are going on. And the reasons for it is because he saw a lack of spiritualism. So what we need to do is bring the spiritualism back into everyday life and back into cultural awareness, because it's been denied for so long.
Thank you, Susan. I think that's a good point to end, at least end our recording. Craig, can I ask you to thank Susan, please?
Thank you, Susan. As always, that was wonderful. I want to put in a plug for her book. Her book is Unfolding Physical Mediumship. And I think you're working on another book now, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, this Unfolding Physical Mediumship. The book I'm working on now is about, it's an academic, going to be an academic book about how technology and culture and materialism kind of wipe the spiritual out of things.
Wonderful.
Help
Yeah.
to deny. So, yeah, that's what I'm working
Yeah.
on now.
So, yeah. Thank you very much. It was fascinating, and we're always going to want to hear from you some more. So, looking forward to the next presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.